Okay, well, it looks like there's plenty of people joined, which is fantastic. So let's get started. First of all, thank you all for joining. My name is Ben Lloyd. I'm the sales manager for EMEA and Asia Pacific. And I'm joined by my colleague Simon Fern, who's our product manager. So we want to talk to you today about remote working, remote editing with Avid Media Composer and with Adobe Project. Obviously, the situation that we find ourselves in is changing day by day, and each and every country is in a different phase of this epidemic. From our own perspective and experience, as of 8:30 last night, we were pretty much put into lockdown, where only key workers can leave, or you can only leave the home for certain reasons. Actually, at Marquis, we've all been working from home for a couple of weeks already. And our support team are fully operational. We're all working as normal. Obviously, we had to adapt very quickly, but luckily for us, with platforms like Zoom, Teams, Skype, these are platforms that we use every day anyway. So for us, it's quite straightforward to move to a remote working environment. But how about editing? Questions you've probably been asking a lot recently. So there's a number of different ways that you can remotely edit. There's platforms where you can edit in the cloud. There's ways to remote in to your edit suite to edit remotely. But the other approach, and our approach is, which we're going to show you today, is how to externalize your projects in a way that's editable, standalone. You can externalize via external drives or by some sort of central cloud-based storage. We are going to have a Q&A at the end, so if you have any questions that you think of throughout the presentation, please drop that into the chat window or the Q&A window, and we'll be monitoring those, and we'll get to them at the end. Before I hand over to Simon, just closing remarks from me is we are here to help. Marquis have been doing this for years. Project Parking has been around for about 7 years. And actually the first use case that was developed in that platform was to externalize and transfer a project to be able to edit remotely and then reintegrate it later. If you're a current customer of Project Parking and need some help with these kind of workflows, please reach out to support. Like I say, they're fully operational. They're here to help. Any other questions, put it in the Q&A. Feel free to contact me or if a local reseller in your region. And we will be sharing this presentation with you afterwards as well. So that will serve for you to share with your colleagues. And with that, I'll hand over to Simon.
Hello, everyone. As Ben mentioned, I'm Simon Fern. I'm the product manager at Marquis. And so I'll be going through the features we have in our products that allow you to enable remote working for the editing systems. We do this within standard features within two of our products. We have Project Parking and Postflux. We have, for those, if anything you're looking to do for the Avid and for Media Composer projects, we're looking at Project Parking. And then for Adobe and Premiere Pro, we're looking at our Postflux product. I'll go through both in turn. And I'll start with the Project Parking, which, as Ben says, this has been available for a fairly long period of time now. And the workflows that I'm showing are standard features within the product. And we have two methods, really, of enabling this kind of workflow. We have our project transfer option, and that allows us to copy projects and media onto an attached drive, which you then take away for offline editing. And at the end of that process, you have the option to bring that back and reintegrate any updates back into the original source location. Then we also have the standard project archive functionality, which actually allows media and project sharing when that is used in conjunction with centralized storage, such as cloud storage. So it actually allows you to put into place a collaborative remote workflow, and it's all fully version controlled at a project level. And I'll show you both of those. But we'll start with the project transfer. And this allows us to take a project and copy it across to an external drive. So we'll actually copy any of the media files referenced by a project and copy those across to a drive. and copy the project files onto a drive. And when we do that, we'll create the media files into an Avid media files folder structure. So this can actually be plugged directly into a media composer externally and used. And you get the standard functions within Project Parking of allowing you to choose how much of the project to work with. So we'll take either the full project or just a selection of bins. Once that media is on the drive, that drive is fully editable. You can attach that to any media composer, and as long as you use the all drives functions in the media composer to make sure it's looking for the other drives, media composer will immediately index the content within that folder, and you can open the project and start editing it immediately. Once you've completed your work remotely, then we also give you the option to reintegrate those changes back into your main system. So you can bring the drive back, attach it into a Project Parking, and bring that new or the updated project into the main system and reintegrate any changes into the original project, including any mapping of workspaces that's involved in doing that. So this is a very simple workflow. It allows you to transfer full projects or selections of bins within a project, and you require no Marquis software on the destination system. Everything we create in the Avid structure, so you can just use it directly. And then we give you that reintegration option. And this is supported within either the full Project Parking or the cut down archive parking product that we provide. And I'll just switch to the product now and actually show you this rather than continue just with presentations. So within Project Parking, we have our list of project files that we have access to on our system, and we can choose then to do a transfer. On the right hand side, we have the list of the workspaces that I'm working on. I can also see as I've got in this case, this is a 6 terabyte Seagate USB 3 drive that's plugged into my system. It shows us no media at the moment, not analysis, because this is actually just basically a clean disk. Now at the moment, this is just sat there with very little on it. To do the transfer, all I need to do is choose the project I want to work with, hit the transfer option, make sure I'm selecting my copy to external drive option, and then I can choose how much of the project to work with. Maybe I also want to take an individual bin, or in this case, we'll take the whole thing. And we just choose where to send it. In this case, I'm going to go to my E drive, and I can set the job off. Now, as soon as we do that, we'll start copying the media files for the project into an Avid media files folder, and we'll put the project into a projects folder. So if I look at my drive, we'll see that I now have a projects folder where my project files are residing, and have my Avid media files folder where we've built up that structure. So building up the structure for a standalone Avid editor in this case, we have the option to make it shared if that's required, but it defaults to standalone. And we'll build up that structure which will allow the indexer within the media composer to immediately index that content as soon as it's attached. If I do another project, move that across, then we merge that into that drive. So we'll go to the external drive, we'll go to the E, and we'll start it off. And that is now going to put more media files, my drive, and add the project into my projects folder. So it really is as simple as that. This drive could now be detached from my computer, plugged into another media composer, and it will index those files, and those projects will be editable. So then we've mentioned that we have the option further down the line to restore items back in again. In that case, all I need to do to enable that is to add in my Project Parking the location to those projects on the external drive. So let's come through, we find my drive, we find that projects folder, and we'll give it a unique name. Save the configuration, and now we'll see the projects that we put into that folder. And to reintegrate, it's just a question of going through the process again, go through the transfer, choose the reintegrate offline project option, and now I can choose how much to bring back, so I don't have to bring back the entire project. I could again just bring back an individual bin. We can choose how to merge the project files, so I can bring it back into my original location where we'll know that we're going to merge the selected bins into the project inside that location, or could bring it into a new project completely. And then we can control the media mappings. So we can choose if we're going back into shared storage, which drive to bring it back into, which workspace to bring it back into. And if we're coming from the standalone into a shared storage system, especially if you're coming back to a edit shared storage that doesn't have interplay, then we can also make sure that we write content into a shared structure so the media composers and the shared system can index the content. So it's very simple to get the projects offline, and we give that option to bring them back and reintegrate them in the future. So that's the transfer functionality. The other option we had for Project Parking is the project archive. And this is using the standard project archiving functionality that we have, but when we use cloud storage as its central storage, it gives us this extra option, whereby Project Parking can archive content into the cloud storage. It creates its archive structure, and within this we're putting the media files in and we're putting the project files in, but we do this in such a way as to make sure that the media files are all contained in a nice sensible structure based on their original source location in Avid, and we take a version of the project. If that parking instance was to update that archive, then we'll take another version of the project. So it's always additive in the cloud. We put the changes in, but we don't actually overwrite anything. Now this means that another project parking in another location can be given access into that cloud storage. They could download that project, in which case they'll get the project and the media from which they can edit it. And that will give them a fully editable local copy of the project. Now, by the way we're using the archive, they also have the capability to push their changes back into that cloud location, where again, we'll put new media files, anything they've added locally, into the media file section in the archive, but we'll take their particular version of the project and add that version into the central archive. So again, it's additive, it's not destructive. Those changes could then be pulled back down to the main site and they can work on it as well. So it very simply creates a fully collaborative workflow with a central repository of all of the actual information. And that could be expanded out to whatever extent you need to go to. Now within the actual product itself, we do that in just a very simple way. You go through the archive process for the project, choose your destination, and we'll put all of the reference media files into that location together with those original project files. And any updates go through with new versions of the project files and any deltas in terms of new media being added for the actual project itself. When we come to do that restore, they will look into the archive, choose the version that they're working with, and then bring it down into their local system. So they'll be able to get the project down, they'll get the media down. We will handle any differences between the different Avid structures. So if you're coming from an interplay system on the source to standalone media composer, then we'll handle that within the transfer. So the users don't need to worry about that. That will all be dealt with in the background. And that will give them an editable version of the media and the project, which they can start working on. When they go to push it back again, as we say, the changes will go back in and the new version will come back in again. And when we do that new version, we can make sure that they have the option to clearly identify it. So you'll have all the versions coming from the different users and being held centrally and being available to everybody. So it's a very simple, multi-site collaborative workflow. It's safe and non-destructive at the central storage level and has full versioning support within the project. You can use a wide choice of centralized storage systems. We support anybody who has implemented the Amazon S3 protocol, and we support Microsoft Azure. And we give that support between the different Avid platforms. So from standalone media composers through to full interplay on Media Central systems. And this is available within Project Parking, Archive Parking, and Solo Parking. So I'll just show you that now within the product itself. And the only difference to the workflow for the transfer really is we choose our project. We now hit the Archive button, and we choose the destination we want to go to. Now in this case, I have 2 AWS buckets configured, I have a Wasabi, which is S3 based storage, and Azure. And I can choose just to go to AWS and push it up. When we do that archive process, in this case, I already have a copy up there. So what I'd be putting up is a change. So we'll do an update to the early archive. We'll put through any new media files that we have referenced and take that version of the project. And I can identify that to make sure that anyone knows where it's come from. And I can even add some more notes if I want to go into more detail. And then we'd start that off and do the push up into the cloud. I won't actually do that today because I am working from home and I have very limited bandwidth at the moment. But it really is as simple as that. It would push the archive up, we'd see new media files, and we'd see a new version of the project. Anybody that then has access within Project Parking to that storage will be able to come and look in the archive section, look into the different, in this case I have the 4 options, but we'll look into the AWS one, find the project that's pushed up there, and we'll see down here the different versions that we have. So this one has been used quite a lot, and I have all the different versions that come from various places. If I want to take the latest one, I pick the latest version, hit the restore button, and we can choose to the same level of granularity we have in the other areas, how much of the project to work with. We don't have to bring everything back, and where to put the project files. Again, we could merge into existing projects, or we could bring it back as a new instance. And we can choose to do any media mapping. So if I pick a version that has the media files reference, then we can choose to remap. And so if I'm coming back into a location that has multiple workspaces, I can handle where we're going to map to put in the media. So the Essence has control of where it goes to, same as the way the projects have control of where they go to. So the restore is really, again, as simple as that. It's a very simple process. All users really need to know is the location of that central archive, and then they can archive and restore as they wish. So that's how we work with Avid projects. Now, we have this example that we were given a couple of days ago from one of our customers based out in Australia who have been using Project Parking and actually have been using it for recovery in the last 2 weeks. So we had this note passed a couple of days ago. They've been working with a 600 terabyte ISIS and Nexus storage, and we're moving to remote workflows and have been using Project Parking to transfer, to get the content onto external drives and get the content for use at home for their local editing. And they're in particular using the feature that when we do the project transfer and bring the media and the project files for local editing, if they're actually just working on the project and not adding any new media, then they're able to actually just send their changed bins back into the main system. So they can bring those bins back into the main system and check them into interplay and carry on working. And that needs no relinking within Avid, because all of the projects in the bins we're working with are referencing the original media. So it just works straight off. So they're actually using a mixture then of the local home editorial and remote desktop connections into their main system, which they can work with the completely matched assets and allows them to continually scale out and transition between on-premise to off-site workflow. And they're limiting the amount of external access those remote users need into the main system to be able to work from home. So this is a real-life example of how somebody has used an existing Project Parking to give them this workflow. So for those people who are using Premiere Pro, we have a similar set of functions that we can offer within our Postflux application. Now, Postflux was introduced last year to allow a similar level of control for the Premiere users. It also has functions that allow the users of Premiere to do a project transfer and to do the archive function. Now, in this case for Postflux, the project transfer will copy projects and media to a new location, and the Premiere will actually update the project to reference the media on the new location. So when you open the project that has been transferred, it will immediately link to the media. So again, you don't need any Marcus software on the destination system to work with the transfer workflow. The archive workflow is very similar to Project Parking. You push your media and your project to the centralized storage, and that will enable the collaborative remote editing. It actually uses the same archive structure as Project Parking does, so we still get that version-controlled, centralized project management. For the transfer, we actually copy the project and all the reference media to a connected piece of disk storage. The media will all be consolidated down into the single folder on the disk, and we'll copy the project file as well. And as I say, that project file will be updated so that it links to the new media location, and the project will directly be editable from that new location without requiring you to do a relink. And you can do the reverse, so the equivalent of the reintegration. You build the workflow in reverse, and you can bring the items back in to the main system later on. An example of how we can use the transfer, you can just transfer it to an attached disk for the offline editing. We could transfer the project to a disk connection, that's disk location that is connected over VPN. And we could transfer the project to a network folder that is being monitored by a transfer or an acceleration product you may have to share that across. Or we could just transfer the project to a Dropbox folder. And because we're doing that update to the project, it will be immediately editable on the destination side from that updated location. So let me just show you this within the product itself. It's a Postflux product. For anybody who hasn't seen it before, it has a slightly different architecture to Project Parking. So we have a back-end server running and providing all the details out for control through web pages. In this case, we configure our location to where our project files are. We can browse through in there and find the projects we want to work with. Select a project. The first thing we'll always do is analyze the project to make sure we can see the media files and warn you if we don't have access to the media files. And then we can do the transfer. Now for the transfer, we just come through, we'll choose our target. Now I pre-configured this, but it's actually pointing back to my USB drive. We just have it as our transfer destination. And we'll put it into my Roots Adobe folder. Get it going. Anything can be scheduled or run immediately within Postflux, but in this case, we'll do it immediately. And that will go off and copy the project and the media. It wasn't a very big project, so it shouldn't take very long, as it may already be there. So I was going to my Adobe folder, and here we now found we have the updated project, we have the media files, actually in the case of what we're doing with Postflux, because we're modifying the project, we always want to be safe, so we take a snapshot of the original project as well, so you don't lose anything that was in there. And that's it. That can now be opened and edited on another machine. This project will link to the media in this folder. And as I mentioned, if you want to reintegrate later on, we can reverse the workflow and bring everything back in again. The archive functionality and that cloud sharing, it has the same basic principles. We find the project we're going to work with, we do an analysis. This time we'll archive, and we configure the application to point at the archive destinations in the same way as we do for Project Parking. In this case, I've got an AWS account set up. I can choose where to put that within my AWS S3 bucket. So I'll put that project into this folder. We'll hit next, and we can come through. I can give myself the identification as well, so people know who's generated it. And we do a verification of everything that we do. So we always do checks and calculations, and we can set it going. When we come to do the restores, so that will go up. Again, it's a very small project, so it shouldn't take too long. We now come through and we'll look into our cloud storage, and we'll see that structure within the bucket. And we find within it all of the project files that we put in, and then the versions that we have taken of each of those projects. So we'll see that all coming through. and there's the one I've just put up. If I want to restore it, we just click on that, go for the restore option, and we can choose to bring it down again. So this would effectively be the same principle as for Project Parking. Any user that you want to grant access, we just give them the postflux and the connection details for the storage. They will be able to browse in, see the folders, see the projects and the versions, and choose to come through and do the restore. And they'll bring it back to a local disk location. Again, I've pre-configured it for this one. I will just bring it back. We'll choose a folder. And we'll bring the folder content back through. Obviously, if we brought it down previously, we don't transfer content again, so we'll always check to see what we're doing for that. But we'll bring the project back down, we'll bring the media down, and again, we'll update the project file so that it points at the media in the new location. So again, the project file should automatically link to the new media. And then when they've been working on that project, they can push their changes back up into the central storage by the same method. And that could always be scheduled, so you could have that happening on a regular pattern, so you know that the people working remotely are still backing up and archiving their projects every evening when they finish. So actually you protect the work in progress as well. And that's an option that's available throughout both products. And to reiterate on the archive, we'll give you that function, so we'll push everything through into the centralized storage. That can be accessed remotely, you can download, make those changes, and handle this in, as we say, the same method as we do for the Project Parking. We still have that same structure that we make use of for the versioning and for the media, and to give us that flexibility and that safety as we come through, and give you that choice for the remote site to bring everything down and have the freedom to work with the projects as you see fit. And again, we can always push those changes back up again. So it is a truly collaborative workflow. And that completes my part of the presentation. So I'll hand back to Ben for any questions.
Brilliant. Thanks, Simon. Yeah, we've had quite a few questions coming in, which is great. So I'll read them out and you can answer them. How about that?
Okay.
So Andrew says, I have a site that has needed to move a lot of Media Composer systems back to home users. If I have 30 users using the same bins, how are these handled in the sync back?
So if you have, so with the actual bins that you're bringing back in the reintegration, ultimately they come back into the project marked as the process that they've come back. So if you were to bring them, all 30 users were using the same bins and they were all to come back from their different versions, they would actually come back identified in the bin as where they have come back from, or which of the archives they've come back from. So they're not going to try and overwrite or replace each other. You would see within your Media Composer the bin and it's given a subname or a bracketed name of the version that it's come back from.
So you get 30 new variations of that bin. Is that right?
Yes. So it's safe. They're not going to be overwriting each other.
Okay. Thank you. Another one here from Anonymous. How about cloud security?
Well, the cloud security is kind of inherent into your standard principles of how you're working with the cloud. Project Parking and Postflux are getting access into the buckets via the AWS IDs. So if you give us access to those, then the applications will have access to those. In the case of AWS, you could go to using full server-side encryption. So you can actually encrypt your content. That's another level of information, but obviously you then have to make that available to the destination site. So we are secure in the principles of we're using the security that comes from the cloud providers, but obviously you do have to give people access and give people those codes to allow them to get in.
Okay. So there's a follow-up question from the previous one. So saying, so we get a new bin and a mob ID is a question. I think there's no new, it's still the same media, isn't it?
Yes, it's always the same media. Yes, we're not creating any new media. So the mob IDs will come back through. So it would be a link back to the previous asset. So if you're bringing back a bin that's referencing the same media as used in the other bin, we're not going to be transferring the media again. We'll see the media is there. It will just be a reference.
Right. Great. Another one here. How do I know when moving a project is complete and not missing anything? So how do we check that we've copied all of the project across to either the archive or the external drive?
So that will be within the applications. So within both Project Parking, I went through that one quite quickly. So within Project Parking and within Postflux, there is actually, let me show rather than tell. There's an activity panel, and you'll see the progress going through in here. So in the case of Project Parking, if I do a transfer and put it through to my disk, the first stage that we do immediately is we analyze the project, see if we can find all the media. I can actually turn on the pause after analysis phase just to emphasize that. So the first thing we'll always do is check, can we see the media? And we'll warn you if we can't. So if we can't see any media, we'd pause at this point and wait for an action. We'd show you the media files that we can't see. So we'd show you the analysis. In this case, I found everything. I'm okay to go off and start the transfer, and then we'll see the progress going through. That was a very small project, so it went through very quickly. So you'll always see that, and we'll warn you in advance if there's anything missing. So we won't start transferring if there's things missing unless we've warned you and you've overridden the warning. Postflux is very similar. So when you do your analysis, if I find something that's offline, the first thing we'll always do is do the analysis, and we'll tell you what we see. So if we just do the first phase of the analysis, we'll go through, we'll look at the project, and we'll feed back a message to you showing you what we found. In this case, we found that there's lots of media files that were on an E drive that we can't access. So we'll always warn you first, and we'll do that in both products. In the Postflux, any transfers come through into the activity pane. Unfortunately, the one I did in the demo was too quick to actually switch in time, but you'll see a job queue and the progress being shown. So you'll always be fed back the information in both products.
Okay, cool. We've got more and more coming in, so there's a few that I can answer here. Can we rent this software? Ordinarily, these licenses are perpetual that we sell, but obviously let's have a conversation about that afterwards. Contact me. And how quickly can you deploy? So both these Project Parking and Postflux, they are single installers. They're very quick to install. We can license you the same day. They come with quick start guides, so they're very easy for you to set up yourself. Another question here is, can you remotely install? Yes, absolutely. Our support team can remotely install using various platforms, but as I say, they are also easy to install yourself. And depending on where you are in the world, we should hopefully have a local sales partner there as well who are very knowledgeable on how to do this. So there's help everywhere. Can these run on a VM, and are there any constraints? Yes, they can run on a VM. I think, Simon, you'll probably correct me if I'm wrong, but I would just be cautious that if you're wanting to do the external drive workflow, that you make sure that your VM has access to an external USB port.
Yeah, both products will more than happily run on VMs. We do most of our testing in the office based on VMs. The limitation is only ever the connections into the rest of the system. So for Project Parking, it's making sure your VM has your Avid connections if we're pulling from shared storage. And yes, as Ben says, it's just the practicalities of making the connections come through to the VM.
Yeah, okay. One for you, Simon. How many jobs are processed at the same time in Postflux for archive and restore?
So the application will process one job at a time, but will build up a queue of the projects. Now, within the actual job itself, it's multi-threading. So it will get the best performance it can out of the device that we're running on. And that's the same for both applications. They will basically be transferring as quick as they can for the device they're working with, but it does one actual project at a time and then builds up a queue.
Yeah. Okay. Does this product integrate with Aspera on cloud or on premise?
Not via APIs, but Aspera if they was using the kind of the watch folder method that I mentioned in the presentation, you could always put the output into a local network folder that's being watched by them and move the content that way.
Okay. So oh, sorry, there's a follow-on to that, and so that was to give it some context is to accelerate the transfers when integrating with Aspera IBM capability. So it's about accelerating the transfers.
Yeah, so that's kind of the workflow I kind of mentioned within the Postflux. So if you had a local folder that you push the project into, obviously if it's a local network folder, it will be a very quick transfer to that from us, and then that could be accelerated across using the Aspera through to the other side.
Yeah, and we can support tar files as well. So I mean, is there any benefits in creating a single file instead of multiple files?
The only real advantage would be based on how you're configuring the device that's watching. If there's a tar file, then it'd be probably easy to deal with this as a package and make sure it waits for that package to be completed and to be transferred. The advantage probably isn't massive, but it is the option to put things kind of packaged up into the tar file if that makes things easier.
Okay. Another one, project transfer for Media Composer. Is it compatible between different versions of Avid as the software, and then also OS, so Mac and PC?
So it's compatible between different versions of Media Composer. It will handle going between different styles of Avid systems, so it can work between standalone, interplay, non-interplay shared storage. So it'll work through all of those. There's no restriction based around versions of Media Composer. In terms of Mac, the limitation is that the application is a Windows application. So it can always be configured from Windows to access Apple storage and create and read the Avid content in the Avid structures, but the application itself is a Windows application. It could run within a VM on the Windows or within a boot camp within the Mac rather, but it is a Windows application. Postflux is a Windows service, so it runs on Windows, but obviously everything it does is based around web pages, so it supports multiple platforms.
Okay. When using Project Archive, does the remote editor need to have Marquis installed?
In principle, yes. To make use of the full functionality and the bidirectional process, yes, they do. In practice, if somebody understands Avid folder structures, what we're creating in the archive, we don't put in our own wrapper, we don't make it complicated. Everything is inside that archive in an open structure. So it would be possible for somebody who understands the Avid structures to pull it down manually and kind of move the structures about to get the content in the right folders. So there's always a way of accessing the archive without using our software. We make sure that you're not bound into our software forever. But to get that full functionality that we've been showing, there's a benefit from having our software available.
Okay. The other thing to add on that is we have a version of Project Parking called Solo Parking, which is a version designed for single users, which is much lower cost. So we can also look at doing Project Parking with Solo Parking clients. Can you please tell us more about accessing the interplay?
Accessing interplay.
Interplay, yeah.
Well, the workflows we're showing for the Avid aren't really working at an interplay level. If you're using an interplay-based system on the source, then we're still working at a Media Composer project level. So we're still working at the files from the project level. We're reading the files from the Avid structures up to underneath, and we're fully happy with working with those. So we don't need to access interplay to actually use the workflow. So while we have interplay functionality within Project Parking, the workflows I've demonstrated today will work perfectly well within an interplay based system, but we don't need the interplay in which to use it. If you're looking to use the transfer functionality in particular, and bringing assets back in to an interplay-based system, then once the project files or the new bin files have come back, then you would have to open them in Media Composer and then do a check-in to interplay to get the interplay to update.
Okay. Do you have guidelines for the VMs and hardware to host the software? I think really there we say follow the same spec as if you were installing it on tin, on physical server, which for both of these they're single CPU, i7 style or better, 16 gig of memory, and just pay particular attention to the host networking capabilities, especially if you're using a Nexus. And
it's probably valid to say that in this case of the demonstration I did today, that's just running from my laptop, which is reasonably powerful, but nothing special. And it's fully functioning for the workflows that we showed. The only limitation in terms of performance was on network bandwidth, not on the performance of the computer.
Okay, thank you. Are we offering any trial licenses? Yes, absolutely. We have, if you go to our website, to the parking page or Postflux, you will see an option to register for a trial there. You download the software, install the software, it gives you a host ID, you send that to us and we'll respond with a temporary license. A few more, I think, bear with me. I'm only a small company, what is the entry price for parking with the shared cloud workflow? How much will it cost to work with Wasabi? We scale the cost of our products, especially Project Parking, is based on the usable size of your Avid storage. So if you're a small company with, say, a Nexus Pro, then the entry is not going to be a lot at all. And please contact me. We'll discuss prices openly. As the size of the Avid system grows, so does the cost of the Marquis solution. We are doing 20% off discount as well this month, so that helps a bit more. And there's a follow-up there. How much will it cost to work with Wasabi? With Project Parking, you get all of the, and with Postflux, you get all of the connectors to our supported storage included. So there's no extra cost from us to work with Wasabi. And Wasabi have got very good rental models. So we would help you with that. License, is it a lifetime with upgrade support? We offer a support and maintenance program, which is 15% per year of the cost. And with that, you'll get access to all future support updates, as well as our support team. I think we're down to the last one here, Simon. Any limitations when using Nexus emulation storages as a source and destination?
Not that we're aware of. We're really just looking at the folder structures. If those companies are good enough at emulating Nexus to convince Avid, then they will convince us.
Yeah. Okay, wonderful. I think we've thank you all for all these great questions. I hope we covered all of them. I think we've got to the bottom of the list. Obviously, if you think of any more questions afterwards, please contact us. We've got the sales email address up on the screen there. Also, if you want to contact me directly, it's just replace the word sales with Ben at marquisbroadcast.com. Otherwise, the trial license can be registered for and downloaded on the website. If you're a current customer and you need some support with these workflows, then contact our support team. Details are on the website, or it's support@marquisbroadcast.com. Also on the website, you can find our local sales partners around the world who will be able to help you as well. We are recording this, so we will be able to send that out if you want to share it with any of your colleagues as well. Okay, so thank you all very much.